Hey, welcome to the show. This is Karen Kingsbury, and as I've said many times, I have written countless books, but I have never told my story. And that's what this show is all about, just sharing my heart with you, the pieces of my story that you probably don't know. Last week, we talked with my youngest son, Austin, about his heart defect that he was born with and about the precious loss in our life. He lost football at an early age, and it was something very dear to him. And we just talked about the loss. And I read a children's book that I wrote called Let Me Hold You Longer. But this week, we're going to talk about beginnings and the beginnings of a family called the Baxters. Super excited today. I am so thrilled that I have with me my very dear best friends, Scott and Missy Reeves. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. How are you?
I am doing so good. This show is so much fun. I didn't even know. I have said to some of my friends and family, like, this was kind of like walking blind through a tunnel. Like, what am I doing? I don't even know. But it's been a great time. I've really enjoyed it. And I want to hear how things are going with you before we get into the Baxters. We can start with you, Scott. What have you been up to? And Missy, I just want to hear what's been going on.
Well, first of all, you're pretty good at walking through tunnels blind.
Yes, I would say.
And but we've been really well. We've been doing good. We have been extremely busy. First and foremost, with 4 grandsons and
4 little guys,
four
our little
little.
buddies, our 4 little buddies.
They're our pride and joy.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
something we have in common, right? 4 little grandsons that are
Yes,
running
all these
around and
boys.
constantly keeping us. It's so fun.
Yes.
Hey there, podcast listeners. Get ready for an incredible experience because Karen Kingsbury's much anticipated movie, Someone Like You, is hitting theaters on April 2nd across the US and Canada. This film is a beautiful, redemptive, gospel-centric love story based on Karen's best-selling novel. It's been hailed as one of the most anticipated films of 2024. Check out the trailer at someonelikeyou.movie, and while you're there, sign up for Karen's A-List. You can also purchase tickets and learn more about the movie. Again, that's someonelikeyou.movie.
So I know you as 2 of my closest friends and people who we laugh with and we have over to the house, and me and Donald just enjoy every minute that we have with you both. But the world knows you as these famous actors who have been household names for the last several decades, kind of a force in Hollywood and on many different shows. I thought if you just want to give a little, like, I don't know, bio or like what got you into acting, we can start with you, maybe Missy, like what got you into acting, a little bit of your bio and just like what people would mostly know you from.
Well, I think most people would know me from Days of Our Lives. It was just this incredible gift given to me at 18 years old by the Lord, which I didn't know at the time. But I can see his hand now looking back in my life. And he had that job so specific for me for so many reasons that I could go on about. But Days of Our Lives has been my life, and I'm so grateful. And as time went on, we decided, well, maybe we would like a different life for our children. So we decided to move to Nashville, and we've been here 17 years now and still commuted back and forth to LA for work. And now I'm a grandma with 4 grandbabies and just loving country life and just thankful to the Lord for where he has brought us.
That's
Well,
beautiful.
I'm really grateful that he brought Days of Our Lives to her, because Days of Our Lives is what brought us together. Uh, and so, looking back, you know, when you see God's providence, it's really crazy. Even in the midst of crazy Hollywood and how nutty it can be sometimes, you go, wow, every little step that we took and every place that we were placed, there was a purpose behind it. And so, golly, I grew up in LA. So by the time I jumped into the acting world in high school and then started working out of high school, it wasn't that long after I started working out of high school is when I got on Days of Our Lives, and we met in 1988. And so I was on that show for just under a year, and we were just really acquaintances. We saw each other in the halls and in the makeup room. Hey, Missy. Hey, Scott. And it wasn't until I left, about 4 months after I left, when I was visiting that set one day just to say hi to friends. I was in town auditioning and doing various things, and ran into Missy in the makeup room. And I don't know. Obviously, it was the Lord ultimately that kind of sparked that interest. And
See, you're getting the detailed version. This is how we tell stories.
I'm the unabridged.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm Grit. Go ahead.
like,
Go
what?
keep telling me. I'm in the makeup room with you
Yes.
right now. So
Yes.
Karen's going to have to send this to her editor. So anyway, that led to me inviting her over to my place with friends. That night, actually, after we ran into each other, and then the rest is history as far as we're concerned. We were together every day from that point on. The following day, she met my parents. She had dinner at my mom and dad's house. She helped me wash my dogs. And this was, it was January 23rd was our first date. January 23rd, 1989 was our first date that I invited her over to my place with friends. And January 24th was when she came over, and we saw each other every day after that. And we were engaged a month later and married less than a year after that. And that was, we were married March 23rd, 1990.
I thought it would be fun to go back a little bit to what brought us together as friends, because we have had such a good time and shared so many happy, fun moments. And then an entire summer, I don't even remember, was it 2006 or something, where we had, your family came and basically lived with our family. We had, a big house we had just built, lots of space, 7 acres. And we hung out for like a month, and we played guitars together and sang and took hikes and trips. It was just an incredible, I look back at life and I think, so busy, both of us, our different careers, your family, our family, both families, just very busy families, and very visible and always something going on. But somehow God carved out that month and a half, whatever it was, where we were together, and it was like summer camp every day. I don't think we ever stopped laughing. What do you remember about that time?
Well, I remember, we had met before that. Well, I was reading your books. I was reading the Baxters, and then and I kept talking about it to everybody that I knew. And our friends, Phil and Heather Joel, they said, "You're not going to believe it. We're going on a cruise with Karen Kingsbury." And I was like, "I'm going on that cruise with you. I don't care what I have to do. I am going to meet Karen Kingsbury because I want to live in her books, and I just want to be in them." And they were like, "Yeah, come on along." And so that is how our friendship, when we first met. So how amazing that shortly after that, we're spending a summer together. And literally, I would laugh at night, like in the bed in your room, and be like, "I'm in Karen Kingsbury's bed in her house." Like,
My wife was
I was
fangirling over
super
you.
fan, super
So
fan. And it was such a wonderful,
Oh.
special summer. It really was. It's so rare to get that much time with people, and we laughed and laughed and laughed, and our kids just had a ball, and it was just sweet time with the Lord, sweet time with friends, and wonderful season.
And I'm
Actually,
gonna add a
go
little
ahead.
bit to that. Oh, sorry. We a little bit of the unabridged, but Missy had been reading your books, and this was pre-cruise, pre us meeting, and she was like telling everybody, "You've got to read these Karen Kingsbury books, it's the Baxter series." And she was trying to convince me, so many nights, she's like, "Honey, you have got to start reading these books. You are going to love them." Because she knows, I'm a sucker for heartstrings being pulled. And, I love relationship stories that tie families together and tie people together. And so I fought it for a long time. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. So finally, she gave me the first one in the Baxter series. And I mean, after the first chapter, I remember being in bed reading the first chapter of the Baxters, and I'm sitting there and I'm having to like turn over because I'm sitting here bawling and I'm like, what did you do to me? You know, you reeled me in. You I've taken the hook, and now I can't get out, and I don't want to get out, so that's what I dove in head first. So we devoured every one of those Baxter series books, and I
And
remember
every book after that.
and every book after that, and
Every book since.
but the Baxters is what drew us in, and that whole because we're similar in that way. We always wanted kind of this big family with, I mean, we wanted to be the Baxters. We were like, I can envision us on the lake having holidays with our kid and the
But
stuff.
you know what? It's not because they were a perfect family. It's
Right.
because they were a family that just had the Lord in every circumstance in their life, in the joy, in the sorrow. It was just that family that you go, oh, this is how we want our family to be, to handle every situation in their life. That's what was so special. It wasn't like, oh, this idyllic family
Right.
that's not real. It was incredibly real and sad and happy. I mean, it was all the emotions, but just how the family dealt with everything was so sweet.
I think that's what attracted us too, was the raw, real side of the Baxters that, you don't, it didn't shy away from stuff that really, I mean, stuff that we were going through, stuff that our kids were going through, and
Friends, yeah, friends.
wow, it's, it's okay. And there's redemption and there's restoration, and we can relate. I mean, we can fully relate to this, what they're going through. So we just, that just captured us.
So there we are, and we're on a cruise ship, and we're in the green room, which was about the size of a very small, kitchen or something. It was it was like we were behind the scenes somewhere in the kitchen. I felt like, and there we are, and I'm sitting at a table, and I think I came over to your table and asked if I could borrow the salt or something. I don't know what it was, something at your table that you had, or did I come over and say hello to Joel? I'm trying to think what it was, but I mean, it was like we could have reached across tables and touched each other's backs of chairs because it was so small. But then, and I hadn't met you yet at that point, so take it from there.
I knew we were going to be in that room. So, the minute I walked in, I was like, there she is. There she is. There she is. And we were laughing because I'm like, I'm going to act so dumb. I don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm going to start talking about the Baxters and I'm going to make a fool of myself. And then, of course, you and your family were so sweet and gracious. And, Karen, that's what we love about you is that you're real. And you're like that with everybody. You're not just like that because, we just wanted to meet you when we were in this little green room. We've seen you with everyone that reads your books. You're gracious and you're kind and you're willing to listen to them and pray with them. And it is a gift, the way you treat others.
Thank you. So sweet.
And it was sweet. We had a sweet time with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that room vividly.
Yeah.
And going, okay. And then when we met, we both knew, we're like, wow, this went beyond just meeting each other and maybe being familiar with what we did and what you did, and what it was like, man, there's a connection here that we're going to be, I said, we're going to know each other on a much deeper level, because I think
because my wife's going to follow you around for the rest of her life.
So when when we were done, as the cruise moved forward, and we were, I thought, oh wow, this is so weird. There was such a connection there, and there wound up being a much deeper connection there because of because of both of our pasts. And
Yes.
I mean, the connections that we kind of came to discover when we were talking and kind of discussing things in our history and where we grew up, and we were missing each other by that
Literally.
much.
Yeah.
Because we were at the same. I was going to school at the same church you and Donald were going to church at, and it was a small Christian school. So I said, "Wow, we knew so many of the same people, and it was a small circle of people."
It
And
was.
yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah,
How
it was so incredible. It was incredible how God put it together and knew that we needed to be best friends. And I mean, when we're together, the laughter, like, I think we can go from deep stories crying to laughing and crying, and that's like the Baxters too, right? That's exactly kind of
Yeah.
what the point was. So, I wasn't sure if you knew the beginning of the Baxters, but it's kind of fun to share how that happened. So I was, I had written 6 novels, and nobody really knew what they were. I mean, think we had 15,000 copies sold of each one, which meant that on my off time, I was contemplating going back to waiting tables because there was no way we could really afford it. And Donald was teaching, those early years, teaching at West Valley, and then we moved to Arizona, and he was teaching there, and then we moved to Washington State, and I think that's where we were living when we had the cruise, and I got to meet you, and the joy of that. These 2 beautiful, famous actors. I was like, they know me. Like, it was just kind of one of those hilarious moments in my life, and so around that same, before we met. So back to maybe the days of Arizona and then early days of Washington, I got a call from my agent, and my agent said, "Karen, there's Gary Smalley," and Gary Smalley, this guy who was writing nonfiction books about relationships, and he was very well known at the time. He toured and spoke, at different events and whatnot, and I knew who he was. He loves your books. He's in love with your books. He thinks they're amazing. So anyway, he connected us, got on the phone with Gary, and Gary said, "Karen, I keep making a fool of myself whenever I'm on a plane because I'm reading your books and I start crying."
Yes.
Oh, and he said, "My sons are telling me, you've got to get it together, Dad. You can't do this." But he said, "I really want to meet you, and I want to meet your family." So ended up, me and Donald and the kids all flew out to Branson, Missouri, where Gary Smalley lived. And we ended up having this beautiful 2 days. He took us out on Table Rock Lake, and he said, here's what I want to tell you, Karen. He said, "I love your stories. They are going to change the world more than I can change the world with what I'm doing. So I'm praying that your name and your books will become much bigger than what I'm doing, so that people can forget about me, but that they all know your books."
Wow.
Which, what in the world? That was like the most unbelievable thing, for him to say. Super humble man. Of course, it sounded outrageous and like outlandish. Like, that's not going to happen. But he was unwavering. And he said, "Karen, I think what I'd like you to do is head home thinking about a series. Think about writing about a family, and maybe you and I could partner on these novels, and like you could use my relationship teachings, like love is a decision and forgiveness is love, that kind of thing, and use the teachings that I've spent a lifetime kind of gathering and talking about, and incorporate those into some, a series of novels about a family." So I'd never thought about that before. And on the way home, on one flight home from Missouri to Washington, the Lord like filled my heart with all of the stories of the Baxters, like their names, what they did as their career jobs, what their problems were, their struggles, where they lived in the Midwest somewhere near a lake, near a college. Like, it was all there. And I'm just furiously writing out in copious notes the whole flight. Like, I was in a totally different zone, and I could feel the Lord like right there, right there in my heart, just telling me, "This is what I want you to do." And like tears are streaming down my face. Like, my husband, like Donald, like looking over at me going, "What are you, honey? What, why are you crying? What is it? What is happening?" And he's of course used to that. He's used to me being a little bit crazy when it comes to the books. laughing or crying in the corner with my laptop. So he always is, he kind of just pats me on the head. As you know, you've seen it yourself when he does that. I mean, he has that funny voice that he uses, for me, where it's so funny. It's like, it's like his I Love Lucy, like, okay, honey. I don't know. I don't even want to try to do it, but he cracks me up. But I was so in the moment, I almost like didn't even laugh at his teasing me. And got home and I showed all of these like kind of sketches on this family, this Baxter family, that I had the names. So I already had everything that God had given me on that one flight. And I showed my dad, and my dad was like, Karen, people are going to love this. This is going to be like a hope opera. You could just keep writing about it over and over and over. And I thought, okay, I like it. A hope opera. Okay. And he said, when you write it, you need to find that Roma Downey woman and you need to tell her about it, because that Touched by an Angel woman, she would want to make this into a TV show.
Oh my goodness.
And so I was like, okay, Dad, I don't have her phone number. What do I do about that? And so, I began writing them, and they just took off. And it was one of those things where God had other things in mind for our family with adoption that was yet to come. And he knew that this would be the changing point for us, that this Baxter family would change everything. So for the first 5 books, I had, they say on the cover, with Gary Smalley.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
he wasn't really much of a writer. He enjoyed, speaking. He didn't do novels. But then after 5 books, he said, Karen, this is all you. I'm not writing any of this.
Wow.
So he said, you're on your own. You got it. And bowed out. So isn't that something?
Wow.
Amazing.
That is amazing. And I've been in that airplane seat with my head buried in the window. That's why I get a window seat every time I'm on an airplane.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, what am I doing to myself on an airplane? And Karen Kingsbury on an airplane is tough.
Yes. That's such a neat story, though. In all the years we've known each other, I've never heard that story. So that is so neat to hear that.
That's amazing that he handed that off and just bowed out. And
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, there was a piece at the end. He was busy doing his own thing, and there was a piece at the end of each of those first 5 books that said, like, a word from Gary Smalley. And I was writing that too. So
I remember that.
I was writing all of it, and he knew that. And he was like, but the reality was, it dramatically changed the trajectory of my life as a novelist, because suddenly I remember book 2, I went to a book conference and the line was wrapped around the booth and people were just so excited about the Baxters. These were all store owners, people who worked at bookstores at this conference, and they were aware of they were like, they were hungry for book 2.
Wow.
So it was I was crying. I thought Kelsey was with me at that event, and we were just looking at each other saying, something is happening. Like, we could see it right in front of our eyes. Like, something is happening with this family that only God could do. And that was the tremendous, like, changing moment. It was a crossroads. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to have to waitress. Like, this is going to be good.
Right.
I might have a few more people who are going to read these books. So then after the...
Oh, no, I was trying to remember, because you just said something that sparked this. Because it really, truly is life-changing fiction. And I've handed these books to people, books that you would, to people that you would never imagine going into a bookstore and going to that section of a bookstore to, they're just, whether it's guys that are, tough guys and macho guy or whatever. And giving these books to guys that have, after they read them, they're calling me and they're like, "Oh, you're not going to believe it made me cry," but it really also, it didn't just make them cry. It illustrated the Lord in ways that, interestingly, even if they had heard about that previously in their life, they're like, "Wow, it kind of painted pictures that they can understand," and it changed their life.
Yeah.
And which is crazy. And so I was curious, was it life-changing fiction from day one, or did it become, at what point did you decide to kind of call your stuff life-changing fiction.
For me, that was something that I was hearing from the readers. So they would write in, they would email me, and they would say, my marriage, like it was on the rocks, and I read these books, and like I have apologized to my husband, and I've forgiven him, and we're on a different track now, and because of your books and what God is doing through them. And one letter, they said, one woman said, your stories are getting in through the back door of my heart. Like I think I had walls up, and I wasn't teachable.
Wow.
I didn't want to change. I didn't want to forgive. I felt badly done to. I was the victim, and I didn't want to have to, make things right with that person. But your stories came in through the back door of my heart, and it changed everything. And I thought about Jesus. And with Jesus, if he wanted to tell you something straight, he just told you straight. If he wanted to make a point, he would turn over a table. But when he wanted to touch your heart, he told a story. And he let people lean in, like those who have ears to hear, let them hear. And that's something that I feel like he's gifted me to do, in the sense that he puts the story on my heart like a movie, like a film, and I just get to kind of be the first reader. I never feel like I'm making it up. So I've been known to, come to the conversation, at like a dinner conversation, after I've written 2 or 3 chapters that day, and in the course of conversation, I say something kind of crazy like, well, Ashley thought that too before she, and then I kind of stop. Like, oh, wait, she's fictitious. She's not real.
That is hilarious.
My family, rather than trying to commit me, my family is like, it's okay, Mom, just take a breath.
But
funny.
In a sense, I feel like it's sort of like acting in a sense, because you immerse yourself. You're so immersed in your part. You're so immersed in your books and these characters, and you have to sort of go, okay, and now I'm home. I'm not acting anymore. I'm not writing anymore. It's sort of that break you have to make.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Come back to life. Come back.
I've told you numerous times that my name isn't Jack.
Oh, it's too funny.
I know it's hard to have 2 husbands at one time.
Oh,
Yeah.
So funny. That's too funny. Well, speaking of acting, I want to go back a little bit to that. When you were, if you could go back and say something to your younger self. I know you can see the fingerprints of God through your entire acting careers, obviously, and I think it's how did faith make an impact in your journey, and when did that happen? When did you know, okay, this is me and God here on out?
Well, I wasn't a believer when I started Days of Our Lives, so it was after that, probably maybe I was already maybe 10 years on the show, and I knew at that moment that I became a believer, my life was going to be different. My workplace was going to be different. I just knew that from there on out, my job was the Great Commission. I was representing Christ wherever I was, whatever I was doing, with no compromise. So coming straight out of New Jersey at 17 with terrible language and, just living a wild life. I was a wild teenager, to just being so
But you weren't that
changed by
wild.
the Lord. Well, probably in the Lord's eyes, I was pretty wild.
That would be all of us.
I was pretty wild. I mean, it was pretty bad. But I knew, I was like, Lord, you gave me this job for yourself, not to make me famous, but to make you famous, and to represent you now while I'm here, for however much longer you have me here. I'm representing you and not myself. And it was so freeing. It took so much of the pressure off of, I don't have to be an actress. I don't have to be famous. I don't have to have this job to fulfill me, but the Lord's given it to me now to represent him.
Beautiful. And I think to myself, I think when I can remember you and I in New York City one time. I don't know what we were doing, but we took a trip to New York and we saw some shows. We were having so much fun.
Yeah.
And felt like every 20 steps, somebody was stopping you. Melissa, is he? Look! Oh my goodness! Can I have a picture? Can I have an autograph? And you were so gracious. So, if you want to know what it looked like from the outside, here was this beautiful friend of mine just oozing Jesus, loving people, whoever it was that came up and wanted a picture, just you happily stopped and signed an autograph, took a picture. And, it's one of those things where people know that you have Jesus by just being with you, Missy. And I think that's something I love about you. Among all the other things, is just this beautiful grace that oozes from you. And it showed up in your workplace in ways that we'll never know this side of heaven. And I think that's the incredible gift of God. And Scott, you
Praise
too.
the
How did
Lord.
it go for you?
Yes. Totally.
Yes. Amen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was, and on the other side of the fence, I was born and raised in a Christian home, and which was a huge blessing. And but at the same time, it's interesting because when I met Missy, and again, she said she was a wild child from New Jersey. I said I was born and raised in a Southern Baptist church, and I was probably a much wilder child than she was, because I was like, I'm going to do everything. I was the rebel. I was like, I'm going to do everything that I was told not to do because I'm bad. And so, as time went on, by the grace of God, he saved me and salvaged me and led us together, brought us together. And so at the time we met, I was on Days of Our Lives. That was kind of near the beginning of my career, back in the mid to late 80s. And when we met, it kind of, in retrospect, you never know how the Lord's working, because on one side of the coin, it was indicative of where I was in my walk, because she wasn't a believer. But I was like, it didn't really, she was beautiful and we got along, and, I was raised in a Christian home, and, but I wasn't giving that much thought when it came to, where my eyes were and what I was attracted to. But God's providence is crazy, because you look back, and his grace is crazy, because, we wound up dating and getting together. And when that happened, I was aware of my faith in a very immature way, but at the same time, it was there. God was there, and God knows what he's doing. And contrary to what, my desires were, we got married, and, it was rough at times. I mean, we were kids, man. And so
It was a good lesson for us, though,
I think
to teach our children.
Yes.
Is really find someone who loves the Lord like you. You want to be equally yoked, and it doesn't always work out. When I was not a believer when we got married, and so we were able to teach our kids, through some hardship and God's grace. Yes, the Lord just restored our life, but for our kids, we're like, oh, we can help you to avoid
pitfalls.
Yes.
But at the same time, for me, as a very, it made me Missy made me take a look at myself, because I was like, wow, to watch her get saved, and then to watch her grow as a believer. I'm like, whoa. I said, wow, I was born and raised in a home, a Christian home with, my whole life. And here she comes to know the Lord, and it just wham. It woke me up to like, whoa, and she was bold, and she was, uncompromising. And I'm like, wow, man, it was really just cool to see the way God worked in that, and in our marriage and in our lives, to go, you know what, God has mercy, thankfully, and he's gracious, and he blessed, and just, to choose obedience. We were like, man, it was always a struggle, like, okay, there were temptations, and there were this, to go this way or that way, and go, but if you're obedient, we saw the rewards in that. I was like, okay, and it might have not come in our timing, but eventually you're like, okay, I get it, Lord, I get it. He would shake us, and I'm stubborn. So, Missy, she listens and she's like, got it. Me, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna fight that a little longer, and I'm gonna dig my heels in. But then it's like I come up from it all bruised and cut, going, okay, yeah, it took some slapping around, but I got there eventually. But we both feel so incredibly blessed to just to go, wow, Lord, just to see your hand in our life, and how you've worked with our through our children and our grandchildren, blessing us with those gifts. And again, when we came to know you, we were like, wow, Lord, just to you eventually, the whole picture starts getting clearer. The painting starts you're like, oh wow, everything is starting to make sense, and because I saw it as we're all part of this big giant painting, and and some things aren't clear, but then things start getting clearer. You're like, oh wow, yeah, so it was kind of crazy to watch all that, and as we moved forward and we kind of fast forwarded to where we are now, the ups and downs, and again, to relate it to the Baxters, we're like, wow, everyone can find the Baxters in their life, because everyone walks through various things, and everyone's lives looks different, but we're all humans, and so it's kind of crazy to see how that kind of came together.
Well, your story definitely feels like something that could have been from the Baxters. Think about Dane Matthews, who was the celebrity that, the star that everyone kind of knew him as the actor, but what he really craved was family and depth. And, obviously the Lord knows He's so patient with us I was the same, had such a worldly background, not the worst girl at school, certainly, but also in God's eyes, yes, just like Missy, just like you said, yeah, it's something where God has this beautiful hand on you, and He has grace for what you're going through, and patiently draws you to Himself. That's what He does, and that's what you see in the Baxters. What's really fun and what's really crazy is that at about the same time, you were both talking and dreaming a little bit about, wouldn't it be fun to be in one of her, there should be movies on her books. There should be something that, that's what we want to do. We want to get into that. And at the same time, God was starting to plant in my heart the dream of making a movie. We both talked about that a little bit, when you were with us the whole summer, and it was such a fun time, all of our families together, but we did have very deep conversations too. And in those deep moments, the authenticity and the vulnerability of yes, we would love to do this. And me thinking, how can I make that happen? I would cast you today. How do we do it? But how do I do it? How does this even happen? How do you make a movie? How do we begin to do that? And so then over time, the next 10, 15 years that went by, it became very obvious to me that with that, you have to have the money to make a movie, or else you don't get any decisions. I had movies that have been made, and even a TV series that was made, and I've recommended to have you both be in there. And I think sometimes it's almost like, you recommended it, then no. They're nice people. And of course, again, I'm so thankful that those things got made, but I didn't have any say. So then it came time to make the movie Someone Like You. And I thought, you know what? And Donald looking at me in that one moment and saying, if we have to sell everything, then we are going to make a movie. We're going to follow God's will on this. We're going to swing the bat, take the leap, and make Someone Like You into a movie. We're going to use, our finances so we can make the decisions and we can make the movie that God has placed on our hearts. So He gave me courage, that He's that strong spiritual leader. And, I know you're that, Scott, and with Missy too, that we need guys like you. We need to lean in and go, okay, really? Okay, if it's fine, if you feel good about it and you feel God saying yes, then I'm all in. And that's kind of where it was at the very beginning. And I knew right away that my Larry Quinn could only be Scott Reeves. And I remember I talked to you, Missy, and you said, I'm good. I'm good. I really feel like I am not, I'm not looking to act in this season. I'm really loving being a grandmother. I
Yeah.
acted for a long time in and out of that makeup chair in the makeup room or whatever. And just, knowing that you were at peace with that. So I said, okay, great. Well, so we needed to find other actors to sort of surround Scott, but he was the first person that I knew for sure he had to be one of the leads in my movie. So Scott, you are Larry Quinn, and you killed it. You did such a phenomenal job. I just kept being in awe over and over and over again at your performance as playing the biological father. And just to catch people up, but the movie Someone Like You is about two girls, two twin sisters who were separated at the embryo phase at the petri dish. And one grows up with her biological family. That's London. You play London's father in the movie. And then the other one, you donate the embryo, to a doctor who hands it to another doctor, and it's in deep freeze for 4 years, and then goes to this husband-wife doctor team in Nashville. They end up having this baby girl, Andy, and they like to think it's just maybe them. Like maybe it wasn't the embryo. Maybe the embryo didn't take. And even though they'd struggled with fertility for years, maybe this, was actually their daughter biologically. And so they never tell her. And they never tell her that she's probably not biologically related to them. So she grew in her mom's belly. She was born of her mother. So it's very difficult to explain. But when she finds out, she heads in a fit of, anger and betrayal and so upset. This 24-year-old girl heads straight to the Quinn house, her biological parents that she never met. And she finds them in a season where they have just lost their daughter, London. It's the deepest season of grief a parent could ever imagine. And there you are playing the role of Larry, of the father that now has to greet this girl that looks just like, played by the same actress, so looks just like London, comes up the steps, and you've never even met, and she's 24. What was that like, playing the role of Larry? I mean, just from the point where you read the script to the point where you got to take on some of those incredibly tough scenes.
I mean, it was, it was a dream come true, really, because I've always, for years, like you said, over the past decade or almost 2 decades, we had talked about, being involved in bringing some of your stories to life on screen. And so, when I read that book, of course, it was another one that reeled me in, and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, I was bawling at night in bed, and I always, whenever I read something like that, while I'm reading the book, I'm imagining, like sometimes you imagine yourself when you find a character that you relate to, or that, wow, I could be that guy, or I could see myself doing that, playing that role. And so, when, and I knew when you called me, I was over the moon about getting to do that, and super, super flattered and humbled by the fact that you guys called me and, offered me this role. And so but I knew it was going to be an emotional role, and a role where, you're dealing with losing a child. And I mean, that's probably any parent's worst fear, and to have to face something like that. And then when, in this particular story, when you're also, it was a lot of things pulling you in so many different directions, because you have another daughter, really, biologically, but she's someone else's daughter. And, when you've lost, you're dealing with grief, and you're dealing with the desire to grab, to hold on. You have someone else that you can hold on to that's not yours really anymore. And so when I was excited, and I was challenged, and I was nervous because I wanted to do the best job I could possibly do for you guys, because your books have been so impactful in our life, and so I just wanted to do it justice. And on a side note, I aspire to be Donald. I love Donald so much.
So sweet.
And there are so many characteristics, so many traits of Donald that I could pull into characters where as far as sensitivity and not being afraid of dealing with particular emotions and particular things. But it was such a great experience. And the whole time I was playing Larry Quinn, I'm thinking, gosh, man, I want to do this. I want to do Larry, this part justice, because I want to do something else. I want to keep bringing characters to life for Karen and Don, in their in this journey, because I don't believe this is the last thing you guys are going to do. I think there's a lot more to come, and
we can't wait to make the next one. We're already ready to make the next one. We're like, okay, it was way too good. Scott, I have to tell you, and Missy, it was fun. You got to join me in Video Village a couple of days watching Scott perform as Larry Quinn, and we got to talk about this and just how God is so incredible, working things out over decades that we could never have asked or imagined, at how great it actually ended up being. And I don't even know if I've shared this with you, but we've gotten to show the movie to several studio executives, CEOs of major studios, and also Amazon Prime, as they've all taken a look at it, and it could end up being there. At this point, we aren't sure. Down the road, we don't really have a plan yet. But these are people who are like high up in Hollywood, and they were all just they remarked specifically, Scott, about how incredible your performance was,
wow.
And just how they were blown away by it. Like, many of them said, this looks like a $30 million movie. Yeah. And it looks that way. I mean, yeah, it's beautiful cinematography, and we found some great locations that God provided, but the acting is incredible, and it stands out as different from other movies. And Scott, really, I just have to thank you for giving everything emotionally. Obviously, spiritually, you had been obviously praying about it, you could tell, but you just, watching your performance, I've watched the movie so many times now, and we're still in the middle of the kind of getting ready to launch. This will, as this is the end of January now, and we've got just a couple months before everyone's going to see what we already know of, just what an incredible performance you gave. But it is just one of those things where even in the middle of the editing process, coloring and final sound effects and whatnot, and I would just watch just a 15 seconds of a performance from one of your scenes, and tears in my eyes, and just, Tyler would be working with me. Tyler is obviously the director. What was it like working with Tyler? I mean, you knew him as a kid, and then to see him as a director.
I was so incredibly impressed by Tyler. He
came home every night talking about.
I really did. I was like, Tyler's
so
blowing me away.
By Tyler, yeah.
I said, not just, his directorial debut. I'm like, this kid. I knew him as a kid, and I said, but as a man and as a follower of Christ, and just Tyler knows who he is on such a level, and at such a young age. I was blown away, and I attribute, and thank you for the compliments on but man, I'm super humbled by that, and I'm probably one of the most insecure actors on the planet, because I'm always, you're always giving yourself a critique. And so, but he was like an actor's director. He had such great, incredible insight. You could tell he had done the homework, and you could tell he knew exactly what he wanted, but he knew really exactly how to pull it out of everyone too. And he gave everybody the space to do that. And I mean, that's not easy to do when you know what you want, but at the same time you have to kind of let everything breathe and let it happen after you have, it poured into these people, kind of explaining and helping people bring stuff to the surface. And but he allowed that, and
And then at the same time, probably in the back of his mind going, okay, and what time is it? And staying on time. And you said, he was never stressed, never stressed.
he never came.
And,
I mean, he never let us see that if he was.
And then to be getting done on time every day and not, I mean.
On time. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah.
He was. And he was, and I'm like.
That's rare.
I was like, man, Tyler, I'm thinking, man, this Tyler, he is going to go. I mean, this is what he was made to do, man.
Yeah.
I mean, because he is so gracious in the way he handled everybody. And I don't care who it was. He from the top, and I hate to say from the top to the bottom, but from one position to another position, because everybody was as equally important as the next person. And he made sure that everybody knew that. I don't care if you were one of the stars or if you were catering or if you were, I mean, every aspect of making something like this happen is equally important. And he was so good at that. And so I'm like, man, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted his job because he was amazing. So I'm like, man, I hope I get to work with Tyler again. I'm like, this was one of the, and I told numerous people this. I said, it was one of the most unique sets. And again, obviously we all know this, the Lord was at the heart of it. And even that,
absolutely, that
was apparent, even if it wasn't, because we are, we are like-minded, and there were like-minded people involved in this. But at the same time, there were people who were like, what are, who weren't believers and who didn't know but it was it was such an incredible setting, to be able to go, wow, we're getting to create something here and bring a story to life, which is, in and of itself, you're like, who gets to do that? And it was a huge blessing. But at the same time, there was a ministry aspect to it, because it's like, okay, man, I better be on my game here on every level, because people are watching us and they're watching how we're reacting. But going back to Tyler, he handled this. He was such an incredible conductor, because and everybody knew it and everybody saw it, and he impacted everybody. And I hope and pray that we get to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. We will do it again, Scott, for sure. And Missy, what was it like watching your husband, in his talented ways, bring to life a character that was from a book you loved? So how was that?
Well, it was interesting because when Scott was just talking, I thought, here's this crazy gift of these soap operas that we were a part of for so many years, where you get one take, usually. That's it. And they want, they work fast, and it's scene after scene after scene. And so I just think, you're so ready all the time with all of these emotions. You sort of know how to prepare so quickly to go to that place. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, he can cry like that because he's had to like, you have to be ready with this emotion. And it is so real. So you have to sort of go to this real place of emotion and be able to have that come out quickly. And so I thought this was such a perfect movie and such a perfect book for him to do that. And obviously he did like that. I mean,
it was amazing. It was incredible.
I didn't expect any less.
Oh my goodness. It was so special. And even still, like by now you've seen obviously an early version of the movie. And I mean, that was an incredible experience to be in the same room with you when you got to see that for the first time. That was an amazing moment. How was that?
It's funny. To be frank, I like I said, usually I hate watching myself. And I because a lot of times I'll sit there and go, oh man, maybe I should have, done this or done that, a lot of times, and I'll be critiquing myself the entire time. But I actually, and again, this was such a unique project in so many ways, but in the biggest way, of what was covering this project. And I was actually able to sit there and just kind of watch and enjoy and kind of let myself get lost in it or in the story.
Because you were that good. That's why.
And
that's the reason that
so
happened.
It was so fun. It was so much fun. And it's not, a lot of things that I've done in the past, you go and you kind of labor over it and you're like, oh, wow, and this, everything about this from start to finish was so, I don't want to say easy, but it was everyone was coming at this from such a different place, and intentions were different and motives there were no ulterior motives. There were no, it was just so nice to come home every night and go, wow, man, I came home feeling refreshed and like, so, and obviously it's a gift that God has given all of us creatively to be able to channel that creativity that He's instilled in us. Totally. I really believe, He's given us our emotions, and He's gifted all of us with the ability and the means, especially in this project, to entertain people and to hopefully draw people. And so it was so much fun just to get to do that and to feel good about that. And I came home going, wow, Lord, I'm coming home actually getting to feel good about everything I did today, so it was pretty, it was a gift.
Well, it was for me, we talked about life-changing fiction and with the Baxters, and it was life-changing for me to watch you give that performance. And just, I know it'll be life-changing for people who see the movie. And, I think back to the Baxters, you may not know, it was originally only going to be 5 books. So this is how God works. He just keeps putting things in, in front of us about what He wants us to do next. I was at a soccer game where the boys were playing soccer, and 4 seats down from me, a woman, an older woman, was talking to her friend. And she said, Betty, I tell you, I just wish there would be a day when everyone could watch Joey play soccer. The kids are out on the field. Sean and Josh and EJ were playing, and they were maybe, 10 years old. And so her friend looked and said, what do you mean you want everyone to? And she said, well, my grandson has never known one of his uncles. She said, back in the day, my husband and I, she said, I got pregnant outside of being married, and they sent me away. My parents sent me away, and I had this baby, and they made me give the baby up for adoption. And my husband and I ended up getting married, and we have 4 other children, but we'll never know where that little boy went and what happened to him. But I just wish we could all be together just one time. She was almost like on the verge of tears. And I'm listening, as I should probably not have been listening. Wow. And I'm looking down the row at this woman, and I thought, oh my goodness, that is what happened to the Baxters. Yes, that's what it was. John and Elizabeth, certainly, John and Elizabeth had a baby outside of wedlock, and she had to, be sent away and give the baby up, and the baby gets adopted by missionaries, and they raise this child in the jungles of Indonesia, and they put him in a boarding school, and then the parents are in a single-engine twin engine, what is it? A little tiny plane, and they're up in the sky, and the plane crashes, and this poor boy loses his adoptive parents, and now he's just an orphan, and he goes back to Los Angeles, and he goes to UCLA and he becomes an actor. And now he's the biggest actor anyone has ever known. He's Chris Pratt. Like everybody knows him. He's Scott Reeves, but he doesn't have his family. He doesn't have the Baxter family. And I thought, oh my goodness. Then he would be looking for the Baxters, and I have to write these books. So I mean, it wasn't even halftime. And I'm like,
wow.
oh, okay.
That's amazing.
this has got to happen.
Wow.
So I called my agent and I said, this has got to be 5 more books at least. And then it just kept kind of going like that, where people kept calling it life-changing fiction. God kept giving me ideas, and next thing you knew, I had 25 books. And this spring, I don't know for sure if we have all the details yet. But this spring, the Baxters, all 39 episodes, will be released on Amazon Prime. So we are looking so forward to that. And the timing of that with this movie, again, could only be God. So we're just going to embrace that crazy timing of it all happening at once. But thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today on the show and sharing your hearts about your past and your relationship and your faith and the beautiful role that you played, Scott, in Someone Like You. It's just incredible. Next week, we are going to talk about how the Baxters actually allowed us to have permission financially to be able to consider adoption, and how that led to us doubling our family overnight, all because we asked our kids one simple question: how would you like a brother from Haiti? So we'll talk about that next week. Thank you so much again, Missy and Scott, my dear sweet friends. We've got to get together and laugh and play cards or sequence or password. We have to. We love password. We have to play that. It'll be so much fun, laughing our heads off. That's right. We have to do that. So, Scott, I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind closing us today in prayer. Then we can be on our way. But I would love if you would do that.
I would love to. Oh, Lord Jesus, we love you so much, and we just thank you for what an amazing God you are, and thank you for your plan and your providence, and just thank you for just all of the blessings you've bestowed on all of us, and just help us to be generous with that and to just have hearts for people. And thank you for this relationship we have with Karen and her amazing talent and ability to be able to reach so many people, and for just the small, tiny part that we might be able to play in that. And just, again, thank you for this time that we've had in the conversation, and just bless her and Dawn as they move forward in their journey. And just thank you again for today and for this year. And we just ask that you would be with their family also. Watch over and protect them as they move forward in this crazy world, and to just get your message out there through her talents. In your precious name we pray, Lord. Amen.
Amen.